recording. Okay, here, just look at me.
Okay.
Just for the record, this is a Timeless Voices of Aviation interview. The date is July 29th, and the interviewee is Larry Drake. Larry, could you just state who you're the son of, and maybe tell me a little bit about your father's Air Force history?
Sure. Yes, my father is Vernon Drake, and he was a second seat and also airplane commander for B-24 in the CBI, and he was in college when Pearl Harbor was struck, and the next day he and his friends all went and signed up for the Air Force, and it was about another, I think, 6 months or so before they actually took him. And as I recall the history, because I wasn't listening all that good when I was a kid, you know, but I've studied a little bit about it, but I still don't remember all of it. But anyway, he went to Texas for Texas A&M for his cadet training, or basic training, I guess. And from there, I can't remember exactly where he went from there for cadet training, but then he ended up at Ballinger Field, where he was a check pilot in the old Bamboo bombers. And from there he was then assigned to B-24s. I think he went to Colorado Springs for that, or Pueblo, Colorado for that. And from there they went on over to India, and actually at a base called Panaveswar in India, where he flew the B-24s. He was a bomber pilot for Azon bombs, and Azon bombs were bombs that evidently could be radio controlled via stick by the bombardier down to the target. But as he tells it, those bombs could only be dropped one at a time, so it meant several passes over the target. But mostly it was bridges and railroads and that sort of thing that he bombed. And he did a number of missions there. I can't remember exactly, 10 or 12 missions as a bomber. But while he was there, he also painted nose art. And of course, this is one of his that he painted. He painted about a dozen nose art. I have, of course, his collection of pictures, and I have some of his original sketches that he made when he painted these. He had an incident where at the time he was a co-pilot, and he and his crew, they were assigned to pick up some VIPs in an airplane that had been the last one, I think, out of the Fort Worth plant. I'm not sure exactly, but it had signatures all over the airplane, you know, from all of the workers, and so it was kind of a PR thing. So they were to pick up all of these VIPs and fly them somewhere else. I'm not sure where, but his pilot was, at the time, was kind of a hot shot, and so on takeoff roll, as they lifted off, he pulled the gear up too soon. The airplane didn't make it into the air and went skidding down the runway with all these VIPs on it, and as a result, no one got hurt, but as a result, the crew got grounded for a period of time. And so, as kind of a pastime, that was one thing he was able to do, was do some more nose art until they got reassigned to another airplane, and his crew, he and his crew, and then they were assigned. I don't remember the name of the base, but it was a little bit further north, where they were assigned to B-24 tankers, where they were flying fuel across the Himalayas into China, and there he did a number of nose art as well. But he did find, when he got there initially in India, that there was no nose art on the airplanes that he saw there. So he started painting it, and of course people saw that he was pretty good at it. So he was assigned to do quite a bit of painting, and he even often said that he felt that those girls that he painted on the nose of airplanes saved his life, because a lot of times he would miss missions because the commanding officer wanted him to paint the nose art instead, you know. So
how did he come about? I mean, was he an artist prior to the war? Did he have some artistic talent, or did that?
He had artistic talent, and of course this is not his best work by far, but yeah, he was artistic from a very, very young age. He grew up in the South Hills of Montana, of Billings, Montana, across from the Yellowstone River, and the dryland farm that was homesteaded by his great aunt, who then his father took over the farm, and it was a tough life. I mean, there were 5 boys. He had a set of twins, a brother and sister, and another brother that died in childhood. So there was a total of 7 kids, but 5 survived, and there were 5 brothers. And it was a hard life. I mean, they lived with holes in their jeans and worked the farm and walked to school and rode horses to school and the whole thing, you know. 5 miles uphill in the snowstorms, you know, type of thing. And I don't know exactly how his father managed to do it, but he did manage to send he and his little brother to college, and it was their first year in college in Nampa, Idaho, when Pearl Harbor was struck. But as far as the artistic abilities, I remember we were out at the old homestead one time and it was pretty fallen down. It was not much left, but we would go out there occasionally and just look around, and he'd tell stories, and we were out there one time, and he said, you know, when I was about 4 years old, he said, my father, I had an old piece of masonite and a pencil, and I drew a horse on this piece of masonite, and my father took it from me, and he used it to patch a hole in the chimney. He said, I wonder if it's still there. And we pulled it down. Sure enough, there was a drawing of this horse. And for a 4-year-old, you wouldn't believe how nice this was done. But so he drew and painted a lot of Western scenes and horses and whatnot. And he was extremely good at it. And so this is just another outlet, I guess, for his talents when he was in the war.
Do you know, did he charge when he wasn't being ordered to do paintings? Did he charge for any of his work?
Oh, no.
You know, like alcohol or cigarettes or chocolate bars or anything?
No, not at all. Not to my knowledge. In fact, when he was in the cadets, he did a lot of the artwork in the cadet books too, and some absolutely fantastic work there. He didn't call himself an artist. He said that he was a what's the word? He called himself a cartoonist, and he was far better than a cartoonist. And if you get ever a chance to look at those cadet books, in fact, on the video I put together, there's some of that artwork. You'll be really amazed. And it's not just they're stories. They're absolute stories of that time, which it really is unique to see it in artwork like that.
Can you, or do you know approximately how many missions your dad flew in the war?
I think it was 32 or 34, if I recall. I have his mission hat, and the mission hat, he put X's on the hat across the brim of the hat for every mission, and the ones that were bombing missions, they were in red, and the ones over the hump were in black. And he did say that the missions over the hump were far more dangerous than the bombing missions because of the weather and the terrain that they were going over. And I mean, if you lost an engine or had a malfunction and you had to bail out, I mean, it might be weeks or months before you ever got out of the jungle, if you got out at all. So he said those were much more difficult. And of course, flying that B-24 was, at that point, was just a tanker. It was just full of gas, so it was just a bomb flying through the air. So.
Did he ever talk about the enemy at all in the stories that he shared with you?
Not a lot. They didn't see a lot of fighters. Most of what they got was ground fire, and he tells the story of having shells come up right through this floor, right between the two seats, between he and his co-pilot. But he never lost a crew member. They flew a number of different airplanes, and then he flew one airplane back after the war.
Do you know, is it one of the ones that survives in the panel form?
No, I wish it was. Because I think the artwork on that one was the best that he had done. I've got pictures of it, but it was really very, very nicely done. But he said it was also the best flying airplane that he had ever flown. So,
do you know how many panels he painted, all told?
I'm guessing about 12. I think it's 10 or 12. I think it's about 12 of them. Yeah. And in fact, as a matter of fact, he can't even remember how many he painted. So, and I have some sketches of panels that there's no photographs of the airplanes. So we don't know whether or not they were actually painted or whether it was just something that, an idea, type of thing. So,
how did he first find out about the CAF collection and the existence of two of his panels painted during the war?
Well, if I remember correctly, those panels were, I think, on loan to Smithsonian at one time years ago. If I remember, I know they were in the Smithsonian magazine, and that's where he saw them, was in the Smithsonian magazine. Yeah, so it was, it was interesting. He didn't talk much about that, and didn't actually make it known, because he wasn't all that proud of the painted girls on the side. He didn't talk much about it, but once he got in contact with the CAF, he had, and I've got binders full of research that he did on nose art, because he did a tremendous amount of research. And then he got in touch, of course, with a number of his crew members. They corresponded for years, and then he did a lot of research in other nose art as well. So, yeah.
What were his thoughts on the war in general, or did he ever share them?
Well, yeah, he rightfully so. I mean, nobody wants to be at war, and war is, everybody loses in war, and he did his duty. He felt that they had to be there and they had to do what they had to do, but he certainly wasn't in favor of war at all. And I ended up during the Vietnam era going into the military, and he was not in favor of that. He didn't feel that was the correct war. It was a different time. So, people at that time, when you have Pearl Harbor attacked and all the young men race to enlist, that was definitely not the times that I lived in. That was a different generation. They had a purpose,
And lastly, I guess, I lost my train of thought, which happens sometimes. I guess I should ask you, what are your feelings? I know what I was going to ask. Did he maintain that artistic streak after the war? Did he continue painting or sketching or drawing?
Yeah, he became an architect. After the war, of course, using the GI Bill, he became an architect. The guy was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. Well, kind of a backstory. Before he went into the service, he went in and enlisted, and then he married my mom. He was only 20 years old, so he had to get his dad's permission to marry his mom, but he could go fly a B-24 bomber, But anyway, so they got married, and they had their first child while he was in flight school, my older sister. And then after the war, they had more of us kids, and yet he's going to school to be an architect. He's working 2 jobs, and he's raising a family, and they're living in the housing that they were living in at the school. It was the military provided the student housing, but it was an old trailer house up in Missoula, Montana, that if you dropped water on the floor, it froze. And doing all of that, he graduated just like in the service in cadet training. He graduated 10th highest in his class of probably about 200 some students, and in school he was a straight A student, and even with all of the part-time jobs and everything, and became an architect. And then he continued to paint. We have tons of paintings and sketches, oils and watercolor. So yeah, he continued to paint, but he did say that architecture ruined his artistic abilities because he had to be so restrictive when he was drawing as an architect compared to painting. So he said later in life, he said he had to learn how to be less restricted to get back to his roots of the art. But yeah, he always did his art.
And I guess lastly, what are your feelings when you come and see his artwork that has survived 70 years later since the war?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Oh, I mean, that's incredible that when you consider, I don't know how many B-24s, I think it was like 30,000 bombers were built, and almost all of them scrapped, and only a handful of artworks exists or survived, and 2 of them are my dad's. I mean, what are the odds, And yeah, it's pretty emotional seeing them. And also, of course, I grew up with all of the sketches and the books, and his log books and his cadet books and all of that sort of stuff. So I've been aware of his art and the pictures, of course. But to see it actually in real life is pretty amazing. Yeah. Well,
Larry, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
I know it's a little awkward up there on the chair, but
as long as it's from here on up, I don't mind.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh yeah.
This is really cool.
Yeah.
This is a highlight of the week, I think, for us.
Oh gosh, highlight of the week for me. I mean, and my sister lives in Elkhart, and she plans on coming over here sometime yet this year. My youngest sister, so she wants to see it as well. Actually, we saw it. Oh gosh, how many years ago?
In Midland.
In Midland, yeah. We were out there for the Midland Air Show, and they treated us like royalty at that time. And that's when I tried to offer them. I took all that stuff down with me, and I had all those uniforms and everything. And I thought, what a neat display to have that whole package. They didn't want it, so.
They're lost.
They're lost is the way I figure it. So can I get down now?
You can get down now.
Let's see if I can.